Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. She moved to see who was standing there, her lips tight, the smile on them starting to fall away, then reappearing as bright as a light as she registered who was standing there. She shrugged her shoulders, displacing the arm resting on them, and made that half step that completely closed the gap between us. Her face lifted up, and she pulled me into a kiss. Ash, who's this? The tennis player said. I don't think he appreciated my interruption. At least that's what I gathered from the look of anger that flashed across his face. He tried to put his arm back around her, but she stopped him. Billy, this is my fiancé, Jace. He's the one I've been in love with since I was 8. Oh yes, that was his name, Billy Gonzalez. I knew it began with AB. Your fiancé? But I thought you and me. Ollie gave him a sad smile. No, you and I are just good friends, and that's all you will ever be, she added, cutting him down to size. He looked at her for a moment and then walked away, a harsh bitch floating behind him. The rest of the group stared at me, and I smiled back at them. It was easy to work out that they were uncomfortable with me, an outsider who was there to take the queen bee from the hive. Ollie did her best, introducing me to the group, some of whom were her closest friends, but it was quickly apparent they belonged to a different world to the one I inhabited, and one I had little interest in. Her friends' conversations dropped into a shorthand known only to themselves. Discussions about people I didn't know, nor frankly did I want to, and situations I cared even less about. Slowly Ollie stopped trying to include me, and after 5 minutes of being ignored I gave up attempting to be social and took the opportunity to move to the bar, seeking a decent drink. I waved a barman over and ordered a large malt. I took the proffered glass and turned to rest my back against the bar while I watched Ollie. She was the most beautiful of the women around her. She was like a queen bee accepting the attention of her workers as her companions danced in attendance. This was just what I had been worried would happen, and I regretted allowing her to convince me to delay my flight back to the boat. Time passed, and the group around her pulsed and morphed as people joined and left. I was on my third drink, somewhat disconcerted, but sadly not surprised that she hadn't returned to me. You won't last, none of her boyfriends ever do. Well, other than me, that is. I looked to see Simon beside me. I've had you checked out, he continued. You are just a 2-bit journalist, living on a boat. Do you honestly think she'll be happy to slum it, playing your dutiful girlfriend for very long? His usually handsome face was twisted in anger, and while I'd been willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and try and like him for Ollie's sake, he wasn't making it easy. That's her choice, I replied. She knows what I am and that I'm not going to change. So how long did you last? He smirked and said, What makes you think she's over me? Well, I don't see you standing with her, I replied, nodding toward the group around Ollie. Neither are you. I'm fine right here. He laughed. Give it a few weeks, she'll come running back. We've spent a lot of time together over the past year. You really think you still matter? I think you've got it backwards. I've known her for over 2 decades. I thought briefly of us holding hands as kids, curled up in a tent under the stars, but I wasn't about to give him that memory. I saw the flicker of frustration in his eyes and smiled. Then I straightened up and extended my hand. Whatever Ollie saw in him, I found nothing to like. His handshake was smooth, mine was calloused and firm, toughened from years on the water. The difference said everything. Simon winced as I squeezed his hand and pulled him in close and whispered, I don't like you, and if you ever talk about Ollie like that again. I paused as I squeezed his hand even tighter until I heard the knuckles crack, and he gave a sharp gasp of pain as he struggled to tug it from my grasp. I'll guarantee that you won't be able to use your hand for a month. I let go, and he staggered back, his face white with the pain. He clutched his hand to his chest before hurrying away. Remind me not to get on your bad side, came Lucy's voice from my other side. She was perched on a bar stool, her long legs crossed showing a lot of thigh. A tall ice-filled glass with several slices of fruit and a straw was clutched in her hand. Oh, and he's lying. He and Ash haven't been sleeping together since last summer. He always was a bitter loser. Ah, I said. I love that word. It carries so many emotions and meanings depending on the inflection used. Lucy gave me a calculating look. She's not doing it on purpose, and she gestured at Ollie with her glass, drops of condensation falling on her legs. Ollie was in the middle of a small group of admirers, none of whom I recognized. Obviously, they were not strangers to Ollie as she was very comfortable in their presence, laughing and flirting with the men, stepping close to them. Any more exes I need to be worried about? Lucy checked out the group over the top of her drink. There's a couple. She went on a trip with him a couple of years ago, and she pointed to a tall man. They were supposed to be away a month, but she was back after a couple of days. No one else she was serious about that I know of. She paused, tapping her finger on her glass considering, except maybe Adrian. She pointed at the man now standing next to Ollie. He's not an ex. She heard my sharp intake of breath. I don't mean she's still going out with him. I think they had a couple of one-night flings in the past, but he has been trying to convince her to have a full-time relationship with him for years. He hasn't been successful, but not for the lack of trying. The man was handsome, with a southern Mediterranean cast to his features. He looked in his late 30s and was wearing an immaculate Armani suit. His hand rested delicately on Ollie's arm. Who is he? His father is Maurizio Rossi, she said matter-of-factly, pausing as she obviously assumed I knew who he was. I just gave her a blank expression which told her I had no clue. She sighed at my ignorance of the Rossi fashion house. He's supposedly their fashion ambassador, which as far as I can work out, means he flies all over the world at the company's expense, being photographed in the company of the golden set. I doubt if he's even on tonight's guest list, but no doorman would refuse him in trance. And Ollie likes him? She gave a soft laugh. It really is odd hearing you call her Ollie. You're probably the only person in this room who knows Ashley isn't her real name, and I've only ever known her as Ashley. Adrian, I reminded her. Oh yes. I guess so. They're friends, and he seems nice enough. I know Ash likes meeting the people he knows and places he can take her to, so I suppose she's happy using him. Ollie's bright laughter reached us in a pause in the music. She raised her cheek, and Adrian kissed it. Her head turned a bit further, and she noted me watching her. She saw the expression on my face and stepped away from her companions, leaving them looking surprised. Adrian took a step to follow her, then stopped as he watched her. Her face lit up with a big smile, and she almost skipped as she hurried over to me. Hey, lover, miss me? She said with a soft giggle that failed to mask a hint of anxiety. For 12 years, I said dryly, and immediately regretted it. Her face fell. She glanced back at the group of people she'd just left, a guilty expression on her face as she realized I'd been standing over here for over half hour or so. Why didn't you come over and join us? She asked. I raised my eyebrows. I was there, but after the first few moments, you and your friends ignored me, so I couldn't see the point of standing around like a spare peg. I raised my glass and took a sip, so I found my own entertainment. Ollie looked embarrassed and swallowed a couple of times. Then she asked Lucy, were you part of his entertainment as well? Lucy said, God no. If anything, he's been mine. You missed him seeing off an obnoxious Simon, and it was a lot of fun to watch. Ollie sort of deflated in front of us. She looked around herself. Then she directed a comment to Lucy. Asking Jace to accompany me here was a bad idea, wasn't it? Lucy nodded in agreement. I keep forgetting he's not used to this degree of insanity. The need to network, Ollie added. It just seems so superficial, I said. But it is interesting watching you interact with these people. I don't know how you stand it. I'm sad to say I've got used to it. I gave a mild snort of derision. Hey, I said I got used to it. Not that I like it, Ollie said as she snuggled close to me. Do you need to stay here for much longer? I asked, hopeful that she didn't. Ollie sighed. A bit longer, I'm afraid. We are expected to give another couple of interviews. I expect it's going to be interesting, especially since I've outed my poor old boyfriend to the press as my lover and soon-to-be husband. She pointed in the direction of the camera crews who were waiting patiently for her and her co-star. Less of the old. If you don't mind, I'm only 4 weeks ahead of you, I said with a grin. Oh God, my mother warned me about getting involved with older men. Ollie shot back, laughing. I smiled, and behind me, I heard Lucy let out a snort of amusement. Ollie gave me a quick peck on the cheek, and I placed a hand gently on her back in a familiar, supportive gesture. She leaned slightly into the touch and whispered, thank you. I'm going to leave you in Lucy's capable hands while I round up the rest of the cast so we can finish up here. I'll be back as soon as we wrap, and then you're taking me home. Deal. Before I could come up with a reply, she turned and made her way back to the group she'd briefly stepped away from. A few moments later, she and one of her co-stars were escorted over to a setup for televised interviews. I considered whether I should follow and offer moral support, but Lucy lightly placed a hand on my shoulder and gave a small shake of her head. Let her do her thing, she said gently. She'll just get nervous if she sees you hovering. I'll go keep an eye on her. I nodded in agreement. This was Ollie's moment, and I didn't want to be a distraction. The interviews were only supposed to last 10 minutes each, but it took the second team over 20 minutes of faffing about to set theirs up. Ollie sat in a makeup chair with Lucy by her side, waiting for the interviewer to get her war paint sorted out. Whilst most of her friends spread across the room, moving and coalescing into new groups only to disperse and reform a moment later, I spotted Adrian standing to one side of the camera crews and watched the interviews intently. It was a good hour before time was called and Ollie's obligations for the evening were over, and she started back in my direction. She'd only taken a few steps before she was intercepted by Adrian, who put his head close to hers and seemed to say something. Ollie changed direction and followed Adrian to where several of her so-called friends waited. Then her group of sycophants coalesced and reformed around her. Enough was enough, so much for her. I'll be right back. I walked over. Ollie was standing with her back to me talking to that Adrian guy. I'd never felt comfortable at social events, and high amongst my dislikes was that moment when convention requires you to insert yourself into a group of semi-strangers. Their faces turn in your direction, and the conversation pauses. Then the silence drags out until you shuffle away with your tail between your legs. I stepped into the group and got the pregnant pause until the silence made Ollie turn around to see what was causing it. Time for you lot to all screw off, was what I wanted to say. I held my tongue and forced down the anger rising in my chest. I knew if I said what I was thinking, I'd probably regret it. So I just looked at her, tapped my watch, and waited. Ollie seemed lost in thought, staring past me, then her eyes refocused, and she gave a quick nod. I'm heading out, she said. Ashley, we'll take my car, Adrian cut in, placing a hand on her arm. Not a chance. No way, I snapped. Ashley and I are going home, and you're not coming with us. You're mistaken, he said calmly. I invited Ashley to join me at my hotel for drinks, and she accepted just a moment ago. He gave me a smug look. You weren't invited. Seriously? I turned to her. Ollie, what is he talking about? I asked, my voice tight with frustration. She looked caught off guard, her mouth opened slightly, eyes darting between us. Behind me, someone laughed. Two large men moved toward me, their posture threatening, but stopped when Dorian suddenly appeared at my side. Ollie, what's going on? I repeated. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a car, frozen in mid-step. Dorian put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed. I'll deal with this, he said softly to me. Then he moved to Ollie's side and stepped between her and Adrian. With his back to both Adrian and his bodyguards, Dorian pulled Ollie to face him. Lucy and a second member of Ollie's security team ushered the onlookers away until Ollie, Adrian, Dorian, and myself were alone. Adrian's bodyguards hovered in the background, wearily watching Dorian with the occasional glance at me. Ash, what's going on? Have you agreed to go with him? I heard him say softly to her. She blinked several times before saying, What, who? Did you accept Mr. Rossi's invitation? Dorian repeated. I need to know so I can rearrange the security detail. Well, that wasn't what I thought he was going to do when he'd said he was going to deal with this. I didn't say anything. I just bristled in anger, and those standing closet to me stepped back. Ollie's mouth snapped closed, and she straightened up. She looked from Dorian to Adrian before her gaze settled on me. No, she stuttered. Tony, I'm sorry if you misunderstood me, but I'm going home with my fiancée. His expression turned into one that looked like a child who'd had his favorite toy taken away from him. Somehow I got the impression he wasn't used to his offers being rejected. With that, she came over to me and hugged me. Sorry, she whispered. He asked me if I wanted a drink. I thought he meant here. I should have remembered he often arranges little intimate parties following these events. I take it you've been his guest at one before? She grasped my hand as Daniel led us out of the reception room. She kept her voice low as we walked so only I could hear. I've not been an angel, Jace, so yes, I've been his guest a couple of times, but the last time was more than a year ago. She gave me a smile tinged with sadness. This sort of thing is going to happen. You will meet people I've been involved with in the past, and some of them will try to rub it in your face. I wondered how many I had met tonight, and she must have guessed what I was thinking. I promise I'll never hide my previous lovers from you, but neither will I rub them in your face. So in the pursuit of openness, I can tell you there are only two here tonight. You've met Simon, I'm afraid, and then there's Tony. When she mentioned him, I couldn't help glancing over my shoulder to see if he was following us. I couldn't see him, but there was a group that appeared to be heading towards the exit. And Billy? Ollie wrapped her arm around my waist. Not him. That was wishful thinking on his part. It's not like there have been hundreds, she said. I was pretty picky about who I would share a bed with. There's only been a few over the years, but I'm still friendly with some of them, so it's inevitable you'll meet most of them sooner or later. She gave me a soft smile. Some I'm sure you will like, but they are in my past. Then she lost the smile. Others I'm not sure I liked even when I was involved with them. What about you? Any girlfriends I should know about? I gave her a rueful smile. None I've ever been that serious about. I live on a boat, so it's been mostly holiday romances. There was one girl who crewed for me for a year, I said with a hint of wistfulness in my voice. But she decided to go back to school in the States. We were waiting outside the club for the car to arrive. Ollie was signing autographs for a few diehard fans when Adrian and his bodyguards caught up with us. His previously smiling face now had a bitter twist to it. He stepped up to Ollie and brought his face close to hers. You don't say no when I ask you to join me. You will get in my car, he said in a low hiss. You are mine for tonight because I've decided you are. Ollie looked flustered, and Dorian and I moved to flank her as his limo pulled up behind ours that had just stopped in front of us. Our driver opened the passenger door. The lady said no, I said. Dorian stepped between Ollie and Adrian. Mr. Rossi, you need to walk away. Miss Bell has indicated she has no interest in joining you tonight or at any time in the future. You are making a scene, and the press is lapping it up. His words counterpoint by the fusillade of flashes and the shouted questions. Adrian's security detail made the decision for him and pulled him towards his waiting limo. Ollie and I climbed into the back of ours, and not for the first time over the past few days I wondered just what the hell had I got myself into. The Mediterranean. I was back in my comfort zone, no longer feeling like the proverbial spare part. The sound of the wind singing through the rigging was counterpoint by the gentle rocking of the lost girl as she rode at anchor. A powerful lullaby to which to fall to sleep to and wake up relaxed. We'd flown into Malta late the previous evening, after spending the day at my flat in Brighton. The bitterness at the reception on Saturday evening was still rankling with me as I sat on the plane. We'd taken a private aircraft. That was not my choice. I'd have been happy with a cheap commercial flight, but that was unacceptable to both Dorian and Ollie. Okay, I accepted that flying on a low-cost carrier probably wasn't the message that Team Ashley wanted to project to the world, yet I'd have thought that my offer of BA business class would have been acceptable. Apparently not. Both Dorian and Lucy had rejected my suggestion and informed me that the usual arrangements had already been made. When I pointed out that there wasn't room for him or anybody else from the security team to stay on the boat, he smiled at me. Lucy's nose was already out of joint as Ollie had informed her that there would be no room for her. She was to stay in a hotel with members of the security team. Dorian had chosen the hotel as it overlooked the marina and the Lost Girls mooring. Dorian hadn't seemed all that worried. Oh, don't worry, we'll be there in the background. We are always around wherever Ashley is invited, he said with a smirk. I was going to be interested to find out how they were going to follow us when I set sail in a couple of days. His attitude made me wonder why I shouldn't walk away from the whole thing, but I didn't. I just said, remember, I didn't invite her, she invited herself, so just don't get under my feet when we are on the boat. The next day, the early morning sunlight scattered off the water like liquid diamonds while I sat on the cabin roof with my first coffee of the day. Having pulled on a pair of shorts, I'd slipped out of the cabin, leaving Ollie sleeping. I'd filled the Nespresso with fresh water, added a coffee pod, and made myself a coffee and gone on deck. Sipping the rich coffee contentedly, I watched the early morning activity as the marina slowly came to life. This was my world, and although Ollie insisted this was everything she wanted, I couldn't help but wonder after all that had happened in the past few days if I was still caught in a dream I hadn't yet woken from. I drank slowly, finishing my cup and feeling as ready as I could be for whatever the day might bring. Heading below to the galley, I brewed a second mug of coffee for myself and one for my guest, then made my way back to the captain's cabin where Ollie was still asleep. She stirred as I sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes fluttering open. Her nose twitched at the smell of the coffee. She sat up, settling comfortably against the headboard. She smiled softly and gave me a grateful look before accepting the mug I handed her. She took a slow sip and sighed. Thanks, I really needed this. Her voice then turned more serious. I've been looking forward to this ever since you mentioned living on a boat. I want this to be a fresh start for both of us, but I know I'm carrying a lot of baggage that's been upsetting you. Can I start by saying I'm sorry about the last couple of days? I let things get out of control, especially at the reception. I've always cared about you, and I think it's going to take some of my friends a long time to understand that. I don't know why they thought they could treat you that way. I shrugged. I'm an unknown, and I agree with Lucy's opinion that they are worried about what our relationship will mean for them, especially as some of them rely on you for their access to the in-crowd. I'm not what they expect from your boyfriend. I told you I wasn't going to play the dutiful boyfriend, and quite honestly I don't think I've ever met such a shallow group of people. They are my friends, she said defensively, but that's not an excuse for their behavior. Yours, not mine. I pointed out. I've no time for people like that. I didn't expect you to be with me all the time at the reception, but I didn't expect the cold shoulder I got. It won't happen again, she said forcefully. Lucy is canceling all my commitments for the next 6 months. I gave her a surprised look. I thought Lucy told me you were supposed to start a new film in a couple of months. I was, she said, moving closer, but I've decided to put that on hold while we reconnect. She let out a soft sigh. It might cause some complications, but I don't honestly care. Having you back in my life is worth it. I just worry that you'll get bored, I admitted. Lost Girl isn't exactly a luxury yacht, it's my home. I've done the luxury thing, and honestly, it gets old fast, she said, shaking her head. You need to remember, I'm here because I want to be. And hey, this place has character, it's definitely not a slum. She leaned in and gave me a warm kiss. We stayed like that for a moment, simply enjoying the quiet. There was nothing rushed or dramatic, just a sense of peace between us. Last night, we'd been too tired to do anything more than settle in and fall asleep together, side by side. Now, In the soft morning light, the comfort of each other's presence was enough. She looked at me, smiling contentedly. "I love you so much," she whispered, placing another soft kiss on my cheek. Then she added, "I think part of the reason I didn't try harder to find you before was that I was afraid I'd learn you'd moved on, and that there'd be no place left for me in your life." I gently touched her face. "I never forgot you," I said. "Sure, there were days I was angry about the past, but then I'd see someone who reminded me of you, and it would all come rushing back. That last kiss weighing on me all these years." "Well," she said with a mock-serious tone, "I guess I owe you a few thousand kisses to make up for lost time." "You don't need to overdo it," I smiled. "I love the person you still are, not just the memories." She blinked away a few tears, clearly moved. "When I saw you and you walked away, I thought that was it. That I'd lost you again. We're together now," I reminded her. "That's what matters. But as much as I'd like to stay in bed and avoid the real world, I've got to get up and sort out provisions. We've got sailing to do." "We're not staying here?" she asked, surprised. "Not a chance. I don't usually sail this region. I was only here to cover the Valencia boat show last month. This time of year, I'd much rather be in the Eastern Mediterranean. Once I round up the crew I lined up, we'll head out." Ollie was poking her head into the bathroom, visibly impressed. "Wow, the shower's huge," she said with a grin. "Big enough for two and a small dog," I joked. She gave me an amused look and admitted, "To be honest, I've only ever been on those giant yachts my friends charter." "Well, what you see is what you get here," I said with a shrug. "There's more space in a catamaran than a monohull, but it's not a super yacht. I'll give you the 5-cent tour once you're dressed." She nodded. "I'm going to take a quick shower, then I definitely need food." "Cafe at the end of the pontoon," I said, chuckling. "How hungry are you?" "Starving," she called over the sound of the water. 10 minutes, tops." I stepped out onto the pontoon and spotted Dorian already sitting at a table at the Marina Cafe. He raised a hand in greeting, and I waved back. Seeing him reminded me that I needed to think more seriously about Ollie's safety while she was with me. I really didn't want to bring one of her security detail aboard. Space was limited, especially with Mandy and Paul joining us soon. And come to think of it, I didn't really know much about either of them aside from their sailing credentials, which is usually all that mattered to me. I was about to call Mandy to let her know they could move on board today when I decided to stop by Dorian's table instead. He greeted me with a nod. "Where's Ashley?" he asked, eyes scanning the walkway back toward the boat more often than they looked at me. "In the shower. She'll be at least 10 minutes. I'm going to spend the day provisioning and getting ready to sail tomorrow. We'll be heading for the Aegean, and I meant to tell you I've got a couple of gap year students joining as crew for the next few months. If they're going to be living in close contact with Ashley, then we need them to sign a confidentiality agreement." I gave him a surprised look. "Really? Do you expect one from me as well? If I thought you'd sign one, I'd get you to." "Well, I won't be, nor will I ask them to sign one. I'm the one employing them, not Ollie." We stared at each other, and he was the first to glance away. "That raises another question," Dorian said. "I'd feel a lot happier if I can put one of my team on the boat. I've got to ask, are any of your people experienced sailors? Because if they're not, there isn't the room for another passenger. She's not a luxury yacht. There are only 2 cabins, and Ollie and I will be using one. Mandy and Paul will be in the crew cabin." Dorian sighed. "I sort of guessed that would be the situation. I've hired a yacht and crew so we can shadow you. Would you be okay with us mounting a tracking device on your boat?" I thought for a moment and couldn't see any reason to say no. "You need to get it mounted today," I pointed out. "We'll get it done this morning. It's automatic, and there's a panic button if anything happens." I nodded, and Dorian stood up and began walking towards the hotel. He pulled out his phone and started talking. I called Mandy and told her I was back on the island, and that I needed the pair of them on board by lunchtime. "Not a problem, Jace," she said. "We're all packed and ready. We've been staying on Dad's boat. It's moored on the same pontoon as yours." "Good. I'll see you on board soon." "Will it just be us? Or is someone else coming?" "One guess, my girlfriend." "Actually, why don't you join me at the Marina Cafe first? Ollie's meeting me there in a few minutes, and I'll introduce her to you." Mandy agreed, and I ordered a pot of coffee along with a selection of pastries. Just as I was pouring myself a cup, I saw Ollie step onto the pontoon. She looked around and, spotting me, headed in my direction. She wore white designer shorts that showed off her long, tanned legs, and a t-shirt with the logo Glamour Girl printed in pink across the chest. Her eyes were hidden behind a pair of expensive sunglasses, and her blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail, tucked through the loop of a baseball cap. One of mine, I noticed. She was beautiful, but had dressed casually to avoid drawing too much attention. In that, she partly succeeded. She didn't look like the Hollywood star she was, just the most stunning woman in the marina. She greeted me with a smile as she sat down. I poured her a coffee, and she took a bite of a pastry. "So how long are we staying here?" she asked around a mouthful. "Do you mean here?" I gestured at the cafe, or at the marina. Both, I guess. These pastries are incredible, but mostly, when are you going to take me sailing? I'm really looking forward to some time with you. Well, almost alone, I reminded her. I've arranged for a couple of students to crew for me. I've invited them to join us here so you can meet them. She paused, chewing thoughtfully. Do they know about me? Ollie's voice held a hint of worry. Yes and no. I hired them before I knew you'd be with me. I've let them know my girlfriend will be sailing with us, but not who you are. That's why I've asked them to meet us here. If you don't like them, I can see about finding replacements, but they seem to be a pleasant couple. Mandy's the experienced one, her boyfriend Paul not so much, but he's looking forward to the chance to gain experience. Ollie pointed to the security gate at the entrance of the pontoon. Is that them? I looked where she was indicating and said yes. I gave Mandy a wave, and they hurried over. We dropped our bags off on our way over. Mandy said, Is this your girlfriend, boss? Fiancé, I said. We got engaged while I was away. Mandy, Paul, this is Allison. Ollie, the woman in question said. Call me Ollie. Only my stepfather calls me Allison. She gave Mandy a hug and a kiss on her cheek, and then shook Paul's hand. I gestured to them to sit down, which they did. Mandy was happy to help herself to one of the pastries, but I noticed that Paul was giving Ollie one of those. I'm sure I know you from somewhere. Looks. Congratulations, Mandy said. I keep giving this one numerous hints, but so far he's not biting. Have you known each other for long? Ollie smiled. For almost 25 years, we grew up living next door to each other. She squeezed my hand. I moved, and we lost contact. We met up last week and realized our teenage love was still as strong as ever. Have we met before? You look very familiar, interrupted Paul. Ollie gave a little giggle. No, I doubt we've met, but there's a good chance you've seen me. I'm an actress. Paul didn't make the leap, but Mandy did. Her hand froze halfway to her mouth, the half-eaten pastry forgotten. Shit, you're Ashley Bell, she gasped out. My dad loves your films. Paul stuttered. But you said you were Allison. I am. It's my real name. Ashley Bell is my stage name. Jace has only ever known me as Allison. I'd like to leave in the morning, I said to Mandy, trying to get back on track. She shook off her hero awe and concentrated on what I was saying. So, I need you to check the stores on board and see what we need for an initial passage of a week. What we are short of, I'll need you to pick up at the local stores. I want to run along the coast of Sicily, then follow the foot of Italy before making the crossing to Corfu. Unless we have to, I want to avoid sailing at night. I'm in no real hurry, I added. The two sailors, back in serious mode, nodded in agreement. We were all aware of the risks involved in sailing through the night. Once we were off the coast of Sicily, there were numerous mooring and marinas where we'd be able to spend a comfortable evening at anchor. Paul, can you check the fuel tanks and get them topped up if necessary? He nodded in agreement. We were interrupted by Dorian returning. Behind him was a second man carrying a fair-sized cardboard box. He asked, Are we okay to install that piece of equipment we discussed? Sure, it looks like we are finished here. There was a grunt of agreement around the table, but I noticed that Ollie and Mandy grabbed the last couple of pastries and wrapped them in paper napkins. I paid the bill, and we headed back to the boat. Ollie and Mandy walked together, heads close as they talked to each other. Dorian was interested in our schedule, and I outlined our intended route. We'll be shadowing you, he said. I'd prefer to have one of my people on board. He raised a hand to forestall my response. I know, I haven't got anyone qualified. One reason I want to get this tracker installed and working. We can keep on the horizon, but we will only be 15 minutes away in case of an issue. I meant to ask, do you have a sat phone on board? No, I never needed one. My mobile usually works when I'm close to the coast. I'll add one to the package. We were ready to set off by the end of the day. The tracker, along with a secondary backup, had been installed and thoroughly tested. The girls headed down to the shops with a list of last-minute supplies, taking advantage of the security team's help to carry everything. Meanwhile, we briefly moved Lost Girl from her mooring to the fuel dock to top off the tanks. Paul and Mandy wanted to go clubbing to celebrate their last night in port. They invited us along, but we opted for a quiet dinner at a local restaurant, then back to the boat for an early night. Before turning in, I did a final check of the mooring lines. When I returned, I noticed a trail of Ali's clothes scattered along the passageway to our cabin, clearly meant to be playful. I gathered them with a shake of my head, stepped inside, and found her already in bed, lying on her stomach, grinning over her shoulder. I chuckled and joined her. We lay side by side, talking softly and sharing quiet laughter. The day had been long, and the comfort of each other's presence was more than enough. Eventually, she curled up beside me under the covers, and I wrapped my arms around her. The last thing I remember before sleep claimed me was the distant sound of Mandy's laughter as she and Paul returned to the boat. We left Malta early the next morning, just as the sun began to crest the horizon. The calm waters of the marina shimmered as we powered out into open sea. Before we left, I checked in with Dorian, updating him on our course and destination. As we passed out of the shelter of the coastline, the rolling waves of the Mediterranean greeted us. We raised the sails and shut down the motors. The hum of the engines faded, replaced by the rhythm of the sea, the splash of waves against the hulls, the whistle of wind through the rigging, and the snap of the sails as they caught the breeze. Lost Girl surged forward as I adjusted the bow to match the heading displayed on our navigation system. By nightfall, 14 hours and nearly 90 nautical miles later, we were safely moored in the marina of the quiet Sicilian village of Marzamimi. I'd switched on the radar not long after we left Malta and soon picked up a motor cruiser trailing us. It held position about 5 miles behind, far enough to stay discreet, but close enough to be noticed. Dorian's technical guy had mounted the tracker on the bulkhead by the radio, mounting the aerial on the cross stay. The tracker was a small black box that looked like it was part of the radio. The tracker was broadcasting continuously, and the neat part was the emergency feature. It looked like a power button with a green and red light. Green confirmed the tracker was on, and when the red was illuminated, the emergency beacon was activated. Dorian explained that if we were boarded and unable to activate the emergency beacon, the attackers would usually attempt to switch off the radio, and the act of apparently switching it off would, in fact, activate it. Fortunately, the passage had been uneventful. I'd spent most of the time sharing duty at the wheel with Mandy. Ollie became our girl Friday, eager to learn the ropes and become a true part of the crew. At first, Mandy and Paul were nervous around her. The reality she was just a woman, not a goddess, took a while to sink in. Lost Girl was a surprisingly easy yacht to sail. The previous owners had ordered every option to aid sailing available they could think of. There was motorized this and that, roller reefing on the main and jib, power winches, you name it, they'd thought about it. It meant that in pinch I could sail her single-handed. I tried it a few times, and the trips had wiped me out. That was the prime reason I'd gotten into the habit of hiring a crew member for any trip scheduled to last longer than a day. The harborside restaurant was the source of the wonderful aroma of cooking on open fires that drew us like bees to honey. They were grilling a selection of seafood over charcoal, and joints of goat were roasting in a wood-fired oven. Ollie groaned as she settled in her chair at the table. "Christ, I don't know how the rest of you cope with this," she stated. "I'm completely exhausted. I thought acting was a hard job, but this..." Mandy laughed. "This was nothing, and girl, is an easy yacht to sail. Try raising a wet mainsail in the middle of a storm. Then you'll understand hard, Ollie." It took Ollie a moment to realize that Mandy was serious, and she groaned again. "Welcome to my world, love," I told her. "Somehow I guess you thought I just laze about on my boat writing the odd story." She gave me a guilty look, telling me I was close. I gave her a smile. Well, it isn't that far from the truth. Usually, I only sail for half a day, then find somewhere to moor up and spend a couple of days relaxing. Mandy and Paul smiled as Ollie said, "I'm not complaining, love. Yes, I'm stiff and sore, but I'm the happiest I've been for years, and the smell of the food is driving me crazy. Can we order, please?" She gave me a kiss. We asked the waiter to bring us a selection of their best dishes and a couple of bottles of the local red wine to wash the food down. As we talked and joked about it, took me a while to notice that there was a difference in Ollie's behavior. Gone were the wary glances, the subtle looks in the direction of her security team. Her face had lost its closed expression, and at long last, the girl I remembered was looking back at me. Speaking of Ollie's security team, their boat had arrived about 20 minutes after us and had moored on the other side of the marina. I had seen Dorian and one of his team walking into town earlier, and then nothing. If they were around, I couldn't see them. Dorian had said they'd keep in the background, and it looked like that was the case. Ollie's laugh drew me back. She and Mandy were laughing at a story Paul was telling. Our first dishes were placed in front of us, and a silence fell over the table as we did the food the justice it deserved. "Is this what it's going to be like for the whole trip?" Ollie asked after she sucked the juices from the head of the last of the grilled shrimp on her plate. "Pretty much, though usually, I don't sail for so many hours each day unless I have to. Usually, it's only 4 or 5 hours at most, then find a nice place to anchor for the night. I'll be able to write a few column inches for one of the travel magazines about this place. That's how I travel around. Find an interesting place, stay for a day or so, and hopefully cover my expenses by writing an article. You do know I'm rich," Ollie murmured. "Neither of us need to ever work another day. And how long before we would both be bored to tears? I don't need to do this. I get enough from the books to live on. But then this is so much fun. I get to do my 2 of my favorite things, sailing and writing, and get paid for it." "Just those 2 things?" Ollie said coyly. "Well, no," and I paused. "There's also the opportunity to eat and drink in these amazing locations." "Idiot," Mandy snorted. "What?" I said defensively. And Paul laughed. Oh, you mean I get to do it with my girlfriend? Well, of course, that's a bonus. Ollie wiggled her ring finger at me. Yes, I continued. I mean my fiancée, who I don't think I could live without. Nice catch, Paul offered and raised his hand for a high five. Our hands slapped, and I finished my glass of wine as the waiter removed our empty plates. Fresh plates piled high with succulent slices of roast goat and rice appeared as though by magic. A fresh bottle of wine was opened, and Ollie shifted on her chair so she could rest her head on my shoulder. I can't remember feeling so relaxed for years, she whispered in my ear. Thank you for letting me come with you. I want this time to prove to you that while I'm older, underneath everything, I'm still the same girl who was in love with you. God, I hoped she was telling me the truth, but there was still a niggling doubt at the back of my mind. The taste of roast goat matched the tantalizing aromas that had been teasing us since we sat down. It wasn't long before our plates were empty, and we were mopping up the juices with the last of the bread. Later that night, we moved in counterpoint to the rhythmic motion of the boat as our sweating bodies rocked and slid against each other, moving in harmony to a mutual conclusion that left us gasping out our love for each other. Ollie curled into me, one leg resting across mine, her head on my shoulder with an outstretched arm lying across me. Her eyes shut, and her panting calmed until her little sighs told me she was asleep. Our pace slowed to match the rhythm of the water and wind, sailing one day, and then staying put ready to explore until the wanderlust took hold and we moved on, ready to repeat the cycle. During these idyllic days, 2 different relationships blossomed, and it was the second for which I was most grateful. I'd hoped that our time together free from the insanity of the press and the pressure of her lifestyle would allow us the freedom to connect and re-establish our feelings for each other. It took a few days, but soon it was as though the intervening years had faded away and we were back where we'd been as teenagers. More importantly, Ollie took to a life on the water like the proverbial duck. It was as though sailing was in her blood. Her designer clothes quickly gave way to casual, comfortable ones. When we were out to sea, her uniform of the day was a bikini, an example that Mandy was more than happy to follow. She only needed to be shown what to do around the yacht one time, and her confidence grew by leaps and bounds, matching and then surpassing Paul's skills in a couple of days, while reaching a par to Mandy's sailing skills after a week. We were 10 days into the trip, cruising along the Italian coastline, still following the pattern of sailing one day and resting the next. I'd thrown out my timetable and was enjoying watching Ollie's immersion into my world. Oh, she was still keeping in touch with Lucy whenever her phone could pick up a signal, but from what I could gather, she was sticking to her guns and not considering any roles or engagements for the foreseeable future. That morning, we left the cove where we had been anchored for the past day. The Lost Girl cut through the rolling waves as her twin bows surged forward. Our destination was the marina at Lucca, where we planned to stay a few days before making the crossing to Corfu. Ollie and Mandy were relaxing on the foredeck, enjoying the sun. They both preferred minimal coverage to avoid tan lines, a choice that had become routine after their first stop at a local fashion store, where they'd picked up some small swimwear they found comfortable. Paul and I made sure to bring plenty of loose shorts to stay comfortable during the trip. Both girls were slowly turning a golden brown, their light tans a sign of long hours spent soaking up the sun, especially when out of sight from other boats. Mandy and Paul quickly understood Ollie's wish for privacy regarding photos. She didn't mind group pictures, but asked that no individual photos of her be taken or shared until after we returned home. As she explained to them, I think of both of you as friends, and I understand you'd like to have memories of this trip. But if the press find out where I am, they'd be circling us in hired boats 24/7, and we'll never get any peace. I don't mind you posting suitable photos of us in the future, but I don't want anything to disturb us now. Mandy admitted, I have a couple of us sunbathing. I'll delete them if you want. Thank you for offering, Ollie said, but it's fine. I trust you. Just keep them for yourself, but please don't post them or store them in the cloud. To make life easier for all of us, I'll get Dorian to add encryption software to your phones at our next stop. There's a cool encrypted message app we can use to keep in touch. Paul was at the wheel, and I was using the binoculars to scan the horizon for the yacht Dorian and his team were using. It had taken me a few days and several late-night talks for me to really understand how rich and well-known Ollie was, and how necessary her security team was for her safety. She'd been staring in films for the past 8 years. How I'd never seen her in one before that fated flight still confounds me. Her stepfather had been very astute and had steered her through the many pitfalls that befall many a young actress. He got her an agent who put Ollie's interests first. I would have thought that was their role, but apparently not. Hers was one of the best in the business and had offered her astute investing advice. Her fortune had grown to the point it apparently equaled the annual gross national product of at least one small African country. Dorian's boat, the Xander, was exactly where I expected, about 5 miles behind us. A larger yacht was a couple of miles further back, following a parallel course, closer to the coastline. Its radar track showed it was heading for the same destination as us, and at its speed, it would likely catch up within an hour. Suddenly, a pair of familiar arms wrapped gently around my waist. I felt her press close behind me, her lips brushing softly against the nape of my neck. We swayed together, moving in time with the girl as she met the low, rolling swell bow first. We were under full sail, cruising steadily at about 10 knots. "Have I told you how much I love you?" The woman whispered into my ear. "Not in the last half hour. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten," I teased. Ollie giggled softly and turned me around so I could look into her striking blue eyes. Her smile was warm and full of mischief. "Idiot," she said, her favorite nickname for me, something she called me at least once every hour. "If I ever changed my mind, I'd probably be just as curious about Mandy as you are." She laughed as she noticed the surprise on my face. "I've seen the way you look at her. She's a gorgeous girl." And she was right. Mandy's beauty went beyond the surface. In many ways, she was a mirror image of Ollie. Their builds were remarkably similar. But while Ollie had long, straight blonde hair, Mandy's was black, shoulder-length, and wavy. Their eyes were on opposite ends of the spectrum, as was their natural skin tone, Ollie's creamy white, Mandy's hinting at Mediterranean roots. But after weeks of sun, they were both the same pale golden brown. "She is," I admitted. "Is that why you employed her?" "I also hired her boyfriend," I told her with a playful grin. "Not that it hurt that she's easy on the eyes, but honestly, it was her sailing skills that earned her the job." I tried to look innocent, but she gave me a look that made it clear I wasn't convincing her. We settled onto one of the padded benches along the rear deck. It was hard to focus as Ollie leaned back, the sunlight catching the sweat on her skin like tiny sparks. I gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, and she tilted her face up to meet my kiss. "Is this what you were looking for?" "It's everything I'd hoped for," she said softly. "The last time I felt this free was when I was hiding away on a private island. Even then, I had to be careful around the staff and the other guests," she added bitterly. When I started to ask what she meant, she just shook her head. I made a mental note to ask Dorian or Lucy if they knew what she was referring to. "I love it here, with you," and she stood and sat back down on my lap facing me, her legs tucked up either side of me. She gazed into my eyes and asked earnestly, "Do you believe me when I tell you I love you?" I did. At that moment, the last of my reservations blew away in the breeze. I'd asked her to marry me, but it had almost felt as though I was attempting to fulfill a destiny from my past, to claim the girl who'd got away. Now I could see our future as lines on a chart, mapping out our lives. "Yes," was my answer. "Ladies," Paul called out, "you might want to cover up. There's a yacht that's going to pass us in a few minutes." I looked in the direction he was pointing. The motor yacht I'd seen earlier had apparently picked up speed and was now less than a kilometer behind us, and looked like it would pass us less than a couple of 100 meters to starboard. It was a 60-meter gin palace, sleek lines and walls of tinted windows. Mandy joined us, and both of the women had pulled on t-shirts. Mandy shaded her eyes with her hand and gave the approaching boat a careful, studied examination. "I don't recognize her," she said. "Can you make out the name?" This was addressed to Paul, who had a pair of binoculars raised to his eyes. "Not from this angle. We'll be able to read it off the stern as it passes." He passed me the binoculars, and I used them to examine the yacht. It took me a moment to work out what was odd. Usually, there would be numerous passengers in various stages of undress scattered across the decks. Yet in this case, I could only see one tall man who was staring back at us through the large pair of binoculars that obscured most of his face. Other than following us with the glasses, he made no move, even when I raised a hand acknowledging him. I felt uneasy at his lack of response and called to Paul to steer a few degrees to port to increase the distance between the two yachts. I had unconsciously moved closer to the tracker and the emergency beacon control and was surprised to find where I was standing as the second yacht began pulling past. "She's the Mirabelle, out of Napoli," Mandy said when she could read the name on the stern. "I've never heard of her, have you, boss?" "No," I admitted. "I have a funny feeling I've seen her before," Ollie said hesitantly. Then she shrugged and added, "I can't remember where, though." We watched as the Mirabelle as she drew ahead of us, water boiling at her stern as she rapidly pulled away. The further she drew away, the less the feeling of unease became. Ollie looked pensive. "I'm sure I've seen that boat before," she said again. "Odd that there was nobody on deck, well, other than that creepy guy with the glasses," Paul said. "Yeah, he seemed to be very interested in us," Mandy replied. "It was odd. I agree. I wonder if she's in transit and only the crew is on board," I offered. The track of the Mirabelle on the radar confirmed my earlier thought that she was also heading for the marina at Lucca. Usually, when we moored, Dorian would moor the Xander a reasonable distance from Girl to give us a degree of privacy, yet close enough to respond if there was an issue. Not tonight, I thought. I called him on the sat phone and proposed we moored closer together, admitting to him that something about the Mirabelle had spooked me. We entered the Lucca Marina mid-afternoon on the motors, the wind having died away after lunch. It's not an enormous place. The town stretched back over a low hill and overlooked the marina. A squat stone and concrete seawall gave it protection from the winter storms. The Mirabelle was moored up against the seawall, a 3-story monolith in black and white. Paul and I sailed the Girl past her, and again I felt we were under intense scrutiny. We moored, stern in, on a pontoon on the far side of the marina. Xander eased into a slot, 20 meters away. As soon as the Xander's lines were secure, Dorian stepped ashore and headed in our direction. I acknowledged his wave of greeting and gestured for him to come on board. Ollie, dressed in a t-shirt and shorts, gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. Then she gave me a questioning look. "There's something about that boat that worries me," I told her. "I wanted to have a word with Dorian about it." She turned to him and asked quickly, "Should we be concerned?" Before he answered, he gave the boat in question a close inspection. "It's a bit odd that a boat like that isn't heaving with the rich and beautiful. She's out of Napoli and currently on a 2-month charter, and before you ask, I can't find out who she's chartered to, but we are still trying." "I'm sure I've seen her somewhere before," Ollie said again. "When where?" Dorian demanded. "It can't have been that long ago. She was only launched a few years ago." Ollie shook her head. "If you don't recognize her, then it must have been when I was a guest on another boat, and you weren't needed." Dorian considered and nodded. "But that would mean she was in the Caribbean 2 years ago, because that's when you spent a month on Zoe's yacht. Or that's 6 weeks I rented that tiny island. There were several boats anchored off that resort on the other island. I used the island's security so you could have a vacation." She paused, concentrating, her face screwed up in thought. "That's it. I'm sure that's where I saw her. She was anchored there for several weeks, or at least a boat that looked just like her," and she nodded in the direction of Mirabelle. Paul looked up from the laptop he and Mandy were looking at. "If the boat you saw looked like that, then it was her. She's a Benetti design boat, and they only built one with that hull color. All the others are blue." "Any clue as to who's chartered her?" "Sorry," he told Dorian. "The charter company's website just says she's unavailable until October, when she's scheduled to relocate to the Caribbean for the winter season. It may be nothing, but I'll set up a security watch anyway," Dorian said. "And if you're heading into town, I want at least one of my guys with you at all times." I think Ollie expected I might object, but I fully agreed with Dorian's suggestion. When the 4 of us went out that evening to find a restaurant, we were accompanied by 2 members of the security team. The night passed quietly. The food was excellent, the local wine was smooth, and by the time we returned to the boat, we were all relaxed and in good spirits. Garth, the senior of the 2 security officers, walked us back and informed us one of them would remain on board until morning. I showed him where to find the coffee and left him to settle in. Mandy and Paul had turned into their cabin almost immediately, and Ollie was already curled up on our bed, clearly exhausted. She kicked off her shoes, half-heartedly tried to change clothes, then looked up at me with a tired but contented expression. Rolling onto her back, she reached for me, silently asking for a moment of closeness. I lay beside her and held her gently. "I love how you make me feel safe," Ollie whispered softly, resting her head against my shoulder. "I love you too," I said quietly. She smiled, eyes half closed, comforted by the calm. "I've been thinking," she murmured. "When this is all over, I want to start planning for the future. Something long-term. Maybe even a family one day. Just one?" I asked with a small laugh. She grinned. "Nope, maybe 3. But we'll need a bigger boat." I chuckled, the sound making her shake slightly against me. "So are you going to buy me a new one?" "I'd buy you anything," she replied seriously, "but don't ever let go of the girl. I've never been happier than I am right now." We talked in quiet tones for a few more minutes, until her words slowed and eventually gave way to sleep. I held her close, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breath, feeling the weight of the years we'd lost. That was my last thought before I drifted off. The sound of voices stirred me the next morning. I listened and recognized Mandy and Paul, then Dorian. Easing my arm out from under Ollie's head, I glanced at my watch. Mid-morning. That was the latest I'd slept in years. Ollie stirred as I moved, blinking sleepily and smiling when she saw me. "Did I tell you I love you?" I asked. "Yes," she said, "but I don't mind hearing it again." I sat up with a groan, stretching stiff muscles. "I need a shower and some coffee." "Badly." Ollie yawned and stood. "I'll start the water. You can help wash my back." She walked toward the bathroom, giving me a playful smile as she disappeared through the door. Showered and feeling refreshed, We dressed and followed our noses into the galley. Mandy had left us a platter of fresh fruit, and I made us each a mug of coffee. We took our breakfast onto the deck and found Dorian still in conversation with Mandy and Paul. They left first thing this morning, Dorian said as he saw me. For a moment, I wasn't sure what he meant. Then I realized and looked over to the harbor wall and the empty space where the Mirabelle had been moored. That feeling of unease I hadn't realized I still had lifted, and I gave a mental shrug of relief. Ollie looked relieved, while Dorian wanted to know how much longer we would be staying here. Another day, I guess, I said. Then we'll make the crossing over to Corfu. That's not what we ended up doing. The next afternoon, while Paul and Mandy had gone to the local store to stock up on fresh food for the trip, I was surprised to hear my phone ring. We were in port and could get a signal, so I don't know why I was surprised. Ollie and I looked at it as though we both expected it to burst into flames. "What do you know about Croatia?" was the first thing my agent said after I answered the call and put it on speaker so Ollie could hear. "I'm fine, Catherine," I responded, ignoring her question, "and how are you?" We could hear her muttering, and then "Fine, I'm okay. Where are you?" "The southern tip of the heel of Italy. We are about to head for Corfu in the morning." "Jace, how do you fancy a side trip?" "Let me take a wild guess. Croatia. Yachting Monthly magazine wants you to write 10 pages on cruising around the Croatian islands." "I've never been there, Catherine." "They thought that might be the case. They want a story about you cruising around the islands, 10 pages and at least half a dozen photos, plus a follow-up piece for the following month's edition. You know the type of thing, prettiest islands, best moorings, food, and drink." I did. It was what I did several times a year. "What are they offering?" "It's a good deal, Jace. The Croatian government is sponsoring the article, so there's $5,000 for expenses and another $12,000 for the article. And the follow-up piece? Another $3,000. That was a lot of money for me, but it was peanuts for Ollie, and I wasn't going to accept the commission if it was going to cause a problem for me with her. I shouldn't have worried, as Ollie was quick to answer. "He'll do it. He promised to show me some islands, and I don't care if they are in Croatia or Greece." There was a pause from Catherine's end before she asked, "Who are you?" "I'm Allison. I'm his fiancée." "Oh, congratulations to both of you. You realize you've just broken my secretary's heart. I think she's been secretly in love with Jace for years. She'll have to fight me for him. I've been in love with him since I was 8. I think that wins. Jace, I'll send you an email with all the details. They need the first copy in 6 weeks. Are you okay with that?" I calculated the distances in my head. That should be doable. It'll take us about a week to get there. That gives us a month of cruising around the islands and a week to polish the article. "Thanks, Jace. Bye, Allison. Call me if you want anything." With that, she ended the call. "So, Croatia," Ollie said. "I take it you've not been there before?" I shook my head. "I think I filmed there once a few years ago." "How do we get there?" "2 choices. Follow the Italian coastline as far as Ancona, then cross over to the Croatian coast. Or cross over to Albania, and then up the coast until we reach the islands. We've done Italy. Let's take the scenic route." She kissed me, and it was decided. It took us a week to reach the first of the islands. We modified our travel pattern, sailing each day for about 6 hours. The Xander would keep close by until the last hour when she would surge forward acting as an advance guard, seeking out a suitable mooring for the night. Twice during the trip, Paul drew my attention to the radar display and a blip that appeared to be marking time with us. It would hover on the border of the screen for an hour or so, and then fade away. If it was the Mirabelle shadowing us, then we never managed a visual sighting. I decided not to mention it to Ollie so as not to worry her. The Croatian coastal islands turned out to be a hidden gem, one I was ashamed to admit I hadn't known about. Hell, I was almost tempted to write a bad review just to keep them for myself. Fortunately, Catherine's email had included local contact details and an introduction to the Minister of Tourism. His office had provided us with documents that allowed us to roam the islands freely, and most importantly, anchor where we wished. Some of the smaller islands were almost deserted, wide sandy beaches inviting us to leave our fleeting footprints and laze about in the clear water. Lager ones had towns and marinas where we were able to relax in comfort. Most of the towns hugged the low hills. The terracotta roof tiles of the houses would glow rusty red in the late afternoon sun, an image I was able to record and intended to use in the article. It was the end of our 3rd week that it all went to hell. There had been no sense of trouble. The day before, we had been sailing in and out of the beautiful bays that dotted the coastline of the island of Lusing, finally mooring in the natural harbor of the island's main town. What neither Dorian nor I was aware of, as the town sat on a narrow neck of land, was that there was a second commercial harbor on the far side of the town. It had been our practice to check with the harbor authorities when we first arrived, to see if the Mirabelle had been seen in the vicinity recently or was expected. This time we asked the wrong person. If we had walked across the town, we'd have seen the sleek yacht, and taken the appropriate precautions. That first evening, we had stayed close to our side of the town. The harbor master had recommended a local restaurant, and it turned out to be an excellent choice. The food and drink were delightful, and we discovered a small club a few doors away with live music and a tiny dance floor. Paul and I spent the rest of the evening indulging our girlfriend's need to dance the night away. Not once did anybody approach Ollie, and she reveled in her anonymity. It was a happy and rather merry group that staggered the few dozen yards back to the girls' mooring when the club closed. Next morning after a late start, Ollie and I explored the narrow streets and hidden squares in the vicinity of the harbor. Again, other than the natural appreciation of a woman's beauty and hers, in particular, she was left in peace. In one square we discovered a local craft market, and Ollie flitted from one stall to the next. In the end, I had to buy a cloth shopping bag to hold all her purchases, local jewelry, and sandals, her favorite items. We had lunch at a tiny cafe that had several tables set up in the shade of a vine-covered pergola. Lunch was a fresh salad with grilled baby octopus, each one no larger than the tip of my thumb. Back on the boat, Ollie decided to have an afternoon nap. I was tempted to join her, but the pressing need to work on the article won out. I opened my laptop, settled back in the shade, and opened the draft of my article. I downloaded the images from my camera, saving the best into a new folder for further consideration. I transcribed the notes I'd been taking, working on the details and coming to the conclusion that I'd already collected enough material for at least 3 articles, and we still had more than a week to go. Ollie woke up full of bounce doing her "I'm Tigger" impression as she tried to entice me from the laptop. It was an impression she had been doing since she was 7 and discovered the spring-tailed character, and she did it very well, I might add. The wonderful thing about Allison's is Allison's are wonderful things, and I'm the only one, she sang as she wriggled onto my lap. You do know those aren't the words, I told her, trying not to smile. I gave up and closed the laptop. And thank God there's only one of you. I don't think I'd survive if there were more. She pouted and then laughed before kissing me. She licked her lips and said, honey, then kissed me again. You're mixing up the characters. In my world, Allison's love honey too. Can we go back to that club again tonight, please? Sure, I said, but I don't want to be out too late. We're supposed to leave early in the morning. No, that's fine. Just a couple of hours would be great. I stretched, attempting to work out the kinks, and rubbed my temples, hoping to ease the dull ache behind my eyes. As much as I hated to admit it, I think I needed to get my eyes tested, as this was happening more often after staring at the screen for several hours. Are you okay? Ollie asked, concern in her voice. Just a headache. My fault. I think I need glasses. She took over, gently massaging my temples and neck. We don't have to go out tonight. I'd be just as happy here with you. I'll have a shower and see how I feel. Let's at least plan to eat out. How about the restaurant from last night, and then if I feel up to it, the club afterward? As it was probably the last chance for a while to go out and let their hair down, the girls pulled out all the stops, wearing matching dresses they had found in a harborfront store. For the first time in several weeks, Ollie looked every inch the movie star she was. I had taken a brief nap after my shower, and I did feel a bit better, but I couldn't get rid of a niggling headache. I didn't want to spoil Ollie's evening, so I assured her that I was feeling better. At the restaurant, the proprietor watched her, his eyes screwed up in contemplation. He remembered us from the previous evening, but then Ollie hadn't stood out. Tonight was different. She was the regal movie star. Finally, as the waiter was removing our empty dishes, his curiosity got the better of his proprietary. He came over and asked quietly, so as not to be overheard, I'm sorry to intrude, but are you the film star, Ashley Bell? Ollie gave him one of her 1,000-watt smiles and nodded, then put her finger to her lips. I am, but please don't make a fuss. I'm on holiday, and I want to keep as low a profile as possible. He looked sad at that, suspecting his chance of a celebrity endorsement was fading away. Ollie smiled and beckoned to one of the waiters. She handed him her phone and asked him to take several photos of us with his boss. She gave the proprietor a kiss on the cheek, and he colored up. She smiled and told him, if you give me your email address, I'll send you the best of these when our holiday is over. You have my permission to print it if you want. He handed her a business card which she handed to me, and I tucked in my wallet for her. We have a website, he added. If you would be so kind as to leave us a message. We will, but remember it won't be for a week or so, I reminded him. Then I rubbed my temples as my headache that had been hovering in the distance since this afternoon began to make its presence felt again. I paid the bill as Mandy and Ollie gathered themselves and looked hopefully down the street at the entrance of the club. Paul gave me a concerned look as he saw me pressing my hands to my head again. All of a sudden, the persistent dull ache was now a sharp pain, and I was feeling nauseous. You look pale, how are you feeling? Paul asked. I responded by shaking my hand at him, not wanting to draw any attention to myself. Ollie heard him and gave me a quick, anxious look. You're not well, love. Let's go back to the boat, she said. Behind her, I could see the disappointment on Mandy's face. I knew how much she and Ollie had enjoyed the club yesterday, and regardless of how I was feeling, they had both earned their evening out, and I didn't want to disappoint them. I just need to go to bed, but there's no reason why the three of you can't go to the club for a while. I gave a nod in the direction of the ever-present member of her security team. On this occasion, it was Jensen, an ex-agent of the U.S. Secret Service protection team. So long as you have Jensen with you, I won't worry. Although she tried to hide it, Ollie smiled. You wouldn't mind? She said. We'll only stay for an hour or so. No, go and enjoy yourselves. Wake me with a kiss when you get in. We stepped into the street, and she gave me a long kiss before she linked arms with Paul and Mandy, and they headed up the street. Jensen paused and said, She'll be fine. I'll keep an eye on her and make sure she gets back safely. I made my way back to the girl, and after swallowing a couple of painkillers, I was asleep almost as soon as my head touched the pillow. Sounds of people returning to the boat very briefly roused me, but only for a few seconds. It took me a moment to work out what had woken me. Sunlight was coming through the portholes at a shallow angle, so it was early morning. Then Dorian's raised voice forced the sleep from me, and I sat up. Has anyone seen Ashley? I'm not sure. As we just said, we left the club before her. Isn't she in the cabin with Jace? Came Mandy's reply. I reached over to wake her, and that when I registered that I was alone. Her side of the bed was empty, and there was no evidence that Ollie had slept there last night. There was a knock on the door, but before I could respond it opened and Dorian appeared in the opening. His eyes flashed around the room seeking Ollie, and his expression hardened as he saw only me. Ashley. I shook my head, and he was gone. I was dressed and following him in seconds. A pale Jensen was sitting in the cockpit, and Dorian was towering over him. Tell me again, what happened? Jensen looked at him groggily and reached for the bottle of water that Mandy was holding out to him. He washed his mouth out, spitting the mouthful overboard, then drank half of the contents in one go. Jensen looked at me and mouthed, Sorry, and my heart turned icy. What the hell has happened, and where is she? That's what I'm trying to work out, Dorian snapped. It seems she met up with some friends last night and could just be staying with them. There was a lack of conviction in his last comment that made my hackles rise. She would have let me know, I started. Dorian hushed me, then gestured at Jensen to continue. He swallowed and said, Miss Bell met a couple of friends in the club and decided to join their group for a while after her companions left to come back here. I called my backup for the night to join me, the new girl, Petra. I wasn't worried, but there are some places I can't follow the target that a woman could. He shrugged, and Dorian nodded. We wanted to get back, and Ollie said she would only be a short while. She just wanted to catch up. Jensen was with her, so we weren't worried, Paul pointed out. Jensen said, It only took Petra 5 minutes to get there, and honestly, boss, it was just a precaution. Nothing seemed out of place. Ashley knew the people in the group, they were friends, and I've seen her with them before. Who? Where's Petra? The questions came from Dorian and me simultaneously. I don't know, boss, and it was Simon Davies and that Italian guy, Adrian. There was another guy and several women who Ashley seemed to know. They turned up just as we were getting ready to leave. Just them? There were a couple of Adrian's security guys with them. I've seen them around before, someone said. I cut in, voice sharp with urgency. Ollie's gone, and we're just sitting here doing nothing. Has anyone even tried calling her? We need to get the police involved. Dorian held up a hand to steady the rising panic. Of course we tried her phone, it's off. The rest of the team is already out checking the town, and we're talking to the club staff. Someone must have seen who she left with. I want as much information as possible before we go to the local police. I'm not convinced they'll be much help. I've already requested support from the Home Office. He looked at Jensen, who continued. They saw Ashley and came over. I think everyone appeared surprised to see the others there. They, and he nodded at Mandy and Paul, said their goodbyes and left. Ashley joined Simon's group, and they found a quiet corner to sit in. He paused as though gathering his thoughts. I was off to one side where I could watch her. Adrian's guys were with me. Petra turned up a few moments later. Ashley seemed pleased to see the women, but somewhat irritated with Simon and Adrian. They ordered a round of drinks, and when the waitress returned, she had several bottles of water for us. The security team, I mean, he confirmed. Boss, I'm not stupid. It was a sealed bottle, and I selected mine randomly from those on the tray. It was hot, and I was thirsty, and Petra wasn't drinking. He groaned softly and looked at me. It must have been spiked because after a few minutes the room was spinning, and I remember starting to slump to the floor. I came to about an hour ago in one of those little squares over there. I got back here, and nobody had seen her or Petra. One of the security team hurried across the road towards us, and Dorian stepped down to meet him. They spoke, and I heard Dorian snarl, "Hell." He waved me over. The Mirabelle was moored in the harbor on the other side of town. Was moored? It left first thing this morning, and now we find out that it's been under charter to the Rossi fashion business all this time. It's Adrian who's been following us. And he's taken her. I don't know. I'm sure she's on the boat, but not if she's a willing or unwilling guest. She can't be with him voluntarily. For Christ's sake, he sedated Jensen. But not Petra, that we know of. And if she wasn't, then where is she? His face stony. He responded, that's what I bloody well want to know. I stood there completely at a loss. I'd come back to the boat a happy if sick man. Now for a second time, my world was imploding, and I'd lost the woman I loved. He picked up on my anguish. Jace, I've never seen her as happy as she's been these last few weeks. She loves you. This isn't her having second thoughts. She'd never go away without letting me know. She hasn't in all the years I've worked with her. We will find her. I'll call in a few favors, and we should be able to get satellite imagery of the region shortly. It'll cost us, but I have a healthy budget. We know what time the boat left, so we should be able to find and track it. This is all so screwed up, I murmured. What's wrong with the guy? How does he even think he's going to get away with it? His family has a lot of powerful contacts. But even so, I don't understand his reasoning. He stopped and looked thoughtful. I need to call an old friend. There's a chance he might be able to help. So call him, I said. Let's go back to the boat, and I will. I don't want to be overheard. Back on the boat, we settled down in the salon, and Dorian checked through his contacts until he found the one he was looking for. I'll put it on speaker, but you need to let me do the talking. I'll explain everything after the call. He didn't wait for me to respond and made a call. A deep American voice answered. Davey, my man, how can I help you? Jamal, great to hear your voice, you old scumsucker. Somehow I don't think this is a social call. What's up, man? My principal has been kidnapped, and I have a feeling that yours might be able to put me in touch with someone who can help me find her. Who is she? Ashley Bell, but the kidnapping isn't out in the public domain yet. I understand. So how can Alicia help you? We think Adrian Rossi of the Rossi Fashion House is involved, and I need to get in touch with his father Maurizio. I seem to recall that he and Ollie Mack are old friends. Maurizio Rossi. Oh, you mean Maverick. No way, man. He's a gentleman from the old school. He'd never be involved in anything like that. We are not saying he is, but we need him to talk his son. Adrian is using a yacht that was chartered by the fashion house. There was a long pause from Jamal's side, and I gave Dorian a questioning look. He gave a shake of his head and whispered, wait. There was a hint of a muffled conversation in the background, and I could see Dorian straining to try to make anything out. A soft, sensual woman's voice spoke, breaking the silence. Dorian, I think you need to explain why I should help you. You are accusing the son of one of my oldest friends, and I need you to convince me why I should believe you. I put my hand on Dorian's arm. Let me speak to her, I whispered. He shrugged his shoulders and pushed the phone closer to me. Hi, Alicia. I'm Jace Turner, and I'm Allison's fiancé. Allison, I thought this was about Ashley Bell. It is, I stammered. They are the same person. I've known Ollie for years, and I just don't think of her as Ashley. Ah, okay, that I can understand. But now I need to understand why I should help you. Why I should put a dear friendship at risk. So I told her what we knew and what we thought we knew. Several times I paused as she or Jamal wanted confirmation of specific points. So that's where we stand, I wrapped up. Ollie was last seen in the club in Adrian's company. Now he, the boat, and Ollie are missing, and we have one pissed-off sedated bodyguard with a wicked headache. I need to ask Dorian a question, Alicia said, and I need you to let him answer it. I grunted, and Dorian said yes. You've worked for Ashley for years. Has she ever disappeared on you before? Only Jamal tells me that she and Adrian have a history together. She's gone away with him in the past, and the other one, Simon, was her boyfriend. Is there any chance that she wants to be with one or the other of them, and this isn't an abduction? I gave a growl, but Dorian angrily waved me to keep quiet as he answered her question. Extremely unlikely, her relationship with Simon ended somewhat bitterly, months ago. Her friendship with Adrian was just that. She considered him just a casual friend, although he's been trying to be much more for as long as she's known him. So no, I don't think she would go away with either of them voluntarily. Not now that she's got Jace back in her life. I believe you, Alicia said, a hint of anguish in her voice. I need to make a call, and I'm not looking forward to it. We'll get back to you. And with that, the call ended. After a moment of silence, I asked Dorian, will it work? I hope so. Rumor has it that his father is the only man Adrian is scared of. We didn't sit around waiting for Dorian's phone to ring. His team had set up a temporary command center on the Xander, and that's where we waited. The first of the satellite images of the region were now available on a secure website. We were apparently buying time on a commercial mapping satellite. At least that's what I understood, but the images looked sharper than the ones I was used to on Google Maps. They weren't in real time. The latest sequence was from 6 this morning, and they showed the Mirabelle close to the entrance of the harbor, white at her stern indicating she was underway. The last showed her heading in a southerly direction. We'll get access to more soon, I was told. We've widened the search perimeter. Now we have an idea in which direction they are possibly heading. I think it was the longest day of my life, the sun crawling across the sky, measuring the degree of my despair. Around us, the world spun to its own tune, unaware of the events unfolding. It seemed ridiculous that we were just sitting around while the boat was traveling further away each minute. But without proof, there was no way the authorities would dare stop the Mirabelle on the high seas. We needed proof. Reports trickled in. One of Adrian's bodyguards was seen half-carrying ginseng from the club. A victim of drinking to excess had been the explanation given to the club staff. The rest of the group had apparently left about an hour later, several of the women seemingly needing assistance to walk. The bouncer at the door thought that Ollie was one of the women, but he wasn't sure as she'd been in the midst of the group when they left. Worryingly, one woman he was sure had left with them was Petra, as he remembered her arriving in a run, which had struck him as odd, and he'd asked if she was okay. So she'd stuck in his memory. She'd been walking freely, moving amongst the group. Dorian had received this tidbit by throwing his coffee mug across the deck. Hell, that's how they always seemed to know where we were going. I'd hoped that they'd forced her to with them. He shouted, "Search her gear and bunk. Let's hope their actions took her by surprise, and she left us a few answers behind." He turned to me, anger flashing in his eyes. "She's only been with us for 3 months and came with the best references, guys I'd trust my life with. I don't know what went wrong, but I'll guarantee you, I bloody well will. All I wanted to do was sail out on the girl and search for her, but even I accepted that without intelligence, it would be like trying to find the proverbial needle in a haystack." We were able to follow the Mirabelle in fits and starts as more satellite imagery became available. The boat was still traveling in a southeasterly direction, hugging the Adriatic coastlines of the outer islands. This was obviously to be able to make a dash for international waters should the authorities attempt to stop them. We were only getting updates every 90 minutes, so for most of the time, their position was an educated guess. Mid-afternoon, we lost her. Our best guess was they'd taken refuge in one of the numerous small coves along a 50-mile stretch of the coastline, most probably anchored in the shadow of a cliff where the camera couldn't see her. "We'll get one more pass before darkness falls," Dorian told me. "Somehow I don't think they will risk a night passage." He pointed at the chart on the table where we had marked out the most likely stretch of coastline. "We will have a chopper on standby at first light. It can check the coves in that area." We didn't spot the Mirabelle on the next set of images of the region, so the waiting game continued. All of us kept glancing at the phone resting in the middle of the chart, willing it to ring. It wasn't until late that evening that we got the call we'd been waiting on tenterhooks for. Dorian answered and used the speaker feature so we could hear. After the pleasantries were over, Alicia took over the call from Jamal and got down to brass tacks. Fortunately for all of us, Maverick is staying at his daughter's villa near St. Tropez. He's spoiling his grandchildren. Fortunate because I was in Carcassonne with my family, only a short drive away. I took my family with me. Maverick is my daughter's godfather, and was pleased to see us. That is until I explained why. He called Adrian while I was there, expecting him to deny everything. But he doesn't deny that Ashley is with him. He's saying that she's there as a willing guest. I asked to speak to her. In fact, I insisted, but he initially refused. Finally, after his father insisted, a woman with a faint American accent spoke to me. "What did she say?" I blurted out. "Jace, it wasn't her. I met her a couple of years ago, and while it sounded a bit like her, the Ashley I met didn't have an American accent. Plus, she didn't respond when I called her Allison. Is there any possibility you could get her on the phone again?" Dorian asked. "So we can confirm that." "There's no need. I can confirm that she's on the boat, and she's not a willing guest. Adrian's bodyguards are employed by the fashion house, not him." Maverick got his head of security to call them and read them the riot act. They confirmed that he's got her locked up in a cabin. "Where are they?" "That's the problem. Maverick knows where they are. He got the charter company to activate the boat's remote tracker. And of course, the bodyguards' phones all have GPS. But he won't tell you until you agree to let him deal with his son, and the police are not to be involved." Visions of tossing the scumsucker overboard attached to an anchor faded. But if the old man thought I wasn't going to give his son a good kicking, he was sadly mistaken. I was willing to give him lip service if that was what I had to do to get her back. "Agreed," I said, preempting Dorian's response. "Good. I'll get the security chief to send you the details. The captain has been told to stay where they are and to ignore Adrian's orders. The bodyguards will get all the other guests off the boat." "Not Petra," Dorian almost shouted. "I want her wrapped up like a parcel for us. I'm going to make the rest of life as miserable as is possible." "Who's Petra?" asked a confused Alicia. "She was one of Allison's bodyguards," I explained. It seems she decided to play for the other team, and Dorian is not amused. He'd like to explain the errors of her ways to her. "That's understandable," Jamal growled. "I'll pass on the request that she is confined to the boat." Jamal continued with the details. All of the security team on the boat have been reminded who they work for and understand their role. The crew has been informed by their employers that it is the Rossi fashion house who paid for the charter and that Adrian no longer works for it. The captain is expecting a call from you. I'll text you all the details. The bottom line is that you will have to go and get her, as Adrian isn't going just to hand her over. But remember, Jamal continued, the bodyguards will be given their instructions not to interfere, but they won't allow you to injure their principal permanently. Although I get the impression that Maverick wasn't adverse to his son coming home with the odd bruise. Why can't the bodyguards take Ollie somewhere safe we can pick her up? I asked, confused at the complexity of the proposal. One moment, Dorian told the callers and pressed the mute button. That would make Maverick complicit, he explained. From this point onwards, nobody associated with him or the family business can be seen to interact with Ashley. It's why Jamal stressed that Adrian had been fired. We need to go and collect her, which shouldn't be an issue as he's telling people that she's a guest and can leave whenever she wants. I nodded, not that I totally understood all the semantics, but I was willing to accept the situation if it meant getting Ollie back. I didn't care what the bodyguards thought. Adrian and I were going to have a few words. Dorian unmuted the phone and explained that I understood the situation and would accept it. Plan to act tomorrow evening, Jamal stated. The crew will ensure that the other guests will be out of the way. Adrian will be confined to his cabin after midnight. The boat is currently moored in a cove on the northern end of Dugiotok. It will suffer a mechanical issue soon after they set off, forcing the captain to head back for the marina at Veli Rat. It'll have to anchor in the bay. It's too big for the inner marina. What happens if he tries to abandon the boat and take Ollie with him? I asked. He won't be allowed to. He'll be told that the repairs will only take an hour and none of the yacht's tenders are available. I couldn't believe that Adrian was just going to sit there and let us take Ollie from him, and nobody had mentioned Simon. What was his role in all of this? We received the final details the next morning. The Mirabelle was on her way back to port, cruising at a vastly reduced speed as the captain simulated a major engine failure. The charter firm had sent us plans of the boat, and the Italian bodyguards on board had confirmed Ollie's location. The other bit of news was that apart from the crew and the bodyguards, there were only 3 others on board. Adrian, Simon, and Ollie. We took the girl in case Petra had managed to conceal a tracker on Xander before she left. She hadn't been on the lost girl, so there was less chance we could be tracked. We anchored a good 3 miles from the marina, on the far side of a tall headland. We'd been towing a Zodiac, and just before midnight Dorian, Jensen, and I boarded the inflatable, and the quiet electric outboard pushed us at a fair speed to a small beach just short of the last headland before our target. We knew that the full moon could be a problem. It was too bright, and we were sure to be spotted as we approached the marina. We were going to have to delay until it set. The ideal time for us to approach the yacht would have been 1:30 a.m., but the moon didn't set until 2:30 and we needed to be back on the girl, well before any of the local fishermen began stirring when dawn broke. The 3 of us waited by the beach Zodiac, dressed in black wetsuits. We watched as the moon crawled towards the horizon. At last, it disappeared, and the moon glow vanished, leaving the sea and the coastline of the island in almost complete darkness. Our only illumination the countless stars in the night sky, and the reflected lights from the small town the other side of the marina. No words were required. The inflatable was launched, and the almost silent electric outboard started. We headed out to sea, moving out of the safety of the cove, and began the long sweep around the headland that hid our destination. The Mirabelle swung at anchor, only her anchor lights and a lone deck lamp visible in the dark. We approached slowly, easing up to the dingy platform at the stern. A shadowy figure stepped forward as our rubber hull grazed the platform. We froze until an Italian voice said softly, "Signore Dorian?" "Yes, I'm Caleb. You were told that we would be on board." He tied off our painter, and we stepped on board. Keeping his voice low, he said, "The crew except the captain are in their cabins and won't come out unless there is an issue with the boat. The captain is on the bridge. The others? Signorina Bell is in her cabin. She has the key and is safe. Signore Rossi is in his cabin. My colleague is keeping watch on his door. And Simon? He is in the cabin of one of the stewardesses, a liaison of mutual benefits, money for her, and sex for him." Jensen gave a soft snort and grinned at Caleb, who gave a quintessential Italian shrug. Dorian asked, "Where's Petra?" "She wasn't on board when we left, Signore. She helped bring Signorina Bell on board and then left." Dorian cursed, "Damn it. I will find the bitch. She must have been watching us all the time." Caleb led us into the boat and down a stairway. A second bodyguard stood by a closed door partway along the passageway. "He is in there. You wish to talk with him?" he asked. "Ollie first," I said to Dorian, and he nodded. "That cabin," Caleb said, pointing at another closed door further along the passageway. You go and get her, I was told by Dorian. Caleb here can take Jensen to fetch our Mr. Simon. Bring him to the main salon, Jensen. This gentleman and I will politely ask Adrian to join us for a little discussion. Caleb and the other bodyguard exchanged a few words in Italian before nodding in agreement. Ollie's door was locked, so I knocked. Shit, it was stupid. I was rescuing my woman, and I was knocking politely on her cell door. Screw off. Ollie's voice was harsh and panicky. I stumbled to string out a coherent sentence. Ollie, love, open the door. It's me. Then I added belatedly, Jace. A key turned in the lock, and the door opened a crack, then swung all the way open when she recognized me. A blonde rocket launched herself across the gap, thudding into my arms. It is you, she babbled as we hugged and kissed. I thought Adrian was playing another cruel game when the bodyguard gave me the key and told me to lock myself in, and help was coming. We're here now. Have you any idea what his game was supposed to be? She shook her head and let me lead her along the passageway and back up the stairs to the main salon. Adrian stood just inside the room arguing in loud Italian with the second bodyguard. I couldn't resist the temptation. I stepped close and sank my fist into his belly. He gasped, trying desperately to suck air into his lungs as he folded up, collapsing to his knees. His bodyguard watched him impassively, but shook his head when I drew back my arm for a second punch. One. Okay, but no more. We have our orders, others will deal with him. Regretfully, I returned to Ollie as the bodyguard helped the stricken man to a chair and then took his place behind him. Dorian was talking in a low voice to Ollie, reassuring himself she was okay. We heard Simon before we saw him. Jensen was holding his arm as he was thrust into the room, wearing only a pair of shorts. Any worries that it would be difficult to find out what their intentions were was quickly dispelled when he saw me beside Ollie. It's all your fault, you sanctimonious scumsucker, Simon moaned. We had it all worked out, and then you had to go and be sick. What the hell did me being sick have to do with it? We were told both of you would be at the club. We were going to be surprised to bump into you, then invite you to join us for a drink. The drinks would have been spiked with a special concoction Tony uses on occasions. Not an assault narcotic, more a hypnotic that would have made you and your friends easy to manipulate. Adrian growled from the chair he'd been thrust into. Would have worked. You weren't there, and the other couple was leaving, so I thought we'd blown our chance. But Tony got Ash to stop for one drink. But what were you going to do with us? Ollie asked. You nothing. We'd have let the hypnotic do most of the work for us. You would have come back here, thinking it was your own idea. Tony was supposed to convince you that Jace was playing the field, that he was only interested in you for your money. The narcotic would have made you think it was your own idea. He shrugged. If that pretty crew girl had stayed on at the club, we would have sedated her with a mix of the hypnotic and an assault narcotic to convince her that she was madly in love with Jace and desperately wanted to screw him. We had narcotics that would have made Jace eager for sex. At that, Ollie smirked. A waste of narcotics. He's always eager, I should know. I was surprised she could see any humor in the situation. She grasped my hand and squeezed it reassuringly. She needed to release some of the tension, and this was apparently her way. I responded in kind, and it gave me a chance to have a dig at her kidnapper. That's true, love. I've never needed to use narcotics to make a woman love me. Ollie said, I guess the idea was that I was supposed to find them screwing, feel totally betrayed because of my friendship with her, and then I'd break up with Jace. Which of your shoulders was I supposed to cry on? Or was it going to be both of you? Neither would look at her, but neither did they deny she was wrong. So why carry on, when it didn't work out at the club? I wanted to know. Adrian snapped his head up, a look of madness flashing across his face. She's mine, and if I'd had a few more days, she'd never want to come back to you. What the hell did you think you were going to do? Keep me strung out on narcotics until I let you screw me? She snarled and spat in his direction. The cabin grew silent as one of the Italian bodyguards put his hand on Adrian's shoulder to keep him from rising. He and that stupid bitch Petra decided to carry on, Simon said. She spiked Ash's drink and the other bodyguard's bottle of water. Who was the third man at the club that night? Dorian wanted to know. An acquaintance of his, a high-class pimp. The women were his, all ex-models. A couple had met Ash before. We were going to use one of them if that girl of yours didn't work out. He left and took them with him when he realized what Tony was up to. Dorian tapped his watch. We need to go before the town wakes up. No argument from me. I stood, and Ollie took my hand. Dorian and Jensen nodded at the pair of Italian bodyguards, who nodded back. We made our way on deck, but not before Ollie paused in the doorway. Simon, I'll make sure you're dead in the industry. Find a rock and hide under it. He seemed to collapse into himself, a small man in a big world. Her gaze settled on Adrian, but she just shook her head dismissively and left the cabin. We boarded the inflatable and headed back to the girl, leaving Adrian and Simon with the bodyguards. Waiting to hear their fate from Maverick, I gathered from Jamal that he was less than amused with the actions of his son. We were back on the girl before the sun broke the horizon. Ollie hugged Paul and Mandy, her emotions finally getting the better of her. She sobbed uncontrollably as she hung onto the younger woman. Mandy gathered her up in her arms, and at my gesture took her down to the cabin. Paul was raising the anchor, and we motored out to sea, heading for our rendezvous with the Xander. As soon as we were underway and Paul was comfortable at the helm, I went below deck. Dorian and Jensen were half asleep, resting on the sofas, a couple of half-empty bottles of beer on the table. Ollie was curled up under the cover on our bed, her hair wrapped in a towel. She'd obviously just got out of the shower. Mandy sat on the edge of the bed, holding her hand. She looked up when I entered. She wanted a shower. I thought it was a good idea. I nodded, sat down on the bed, and curled up behind the woman I loved. It had only been 48 hours since I learned she was missing. Only 48 hours. It had been the longest 2 days of my life. I heard the door close behind Mandy, and Ollie rolled over to face me. "I'm so sorry," she said. "Why? It's not your fault. I should have guessed there was no way it could be an accident that Adrian and Simon turned up in that club. I was so stupid to sit down and accept a drink." She looked at me, wanting me to understand and believe her. "I woke up in the cabin you found me in." Adrian was standing at the foot of the bed. It was creepy. He stood there without saying anything for 5 minutes. He wouldn't answer any of my questions, then left. That was the only time I saw him until you appeared. And Simon? I didn't see him until Dorian dragged him into that cabin. It's over, love. We go back to living our lives with one difference. Which is, next week you change your name to Allison Turner. Her arms tightened around me, and her answer was a kiss that would last a lifetime. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.